Mi sentite?
Buongiorno a tutti, sta per iniziare la celebrazione dell'anno forestale. Chiedo alla regia di abbassare la musica. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Councillor, President of EURAF, Mayor and authorities, colleagues and students, it's an honor for me to start the celebration for the fourth inauguration of the Forestry Year of Sardinia 2020-2021. This inauguration ceremony, divided into two sessions as illustrated in the program in your possession, will be followed by the 2 days of international scientific and technical seminar on the topic of agroforestry in preparation for the European Congress that will be held next year here in Nuoro. I will continue this greeting in Sardo, which is our official language here in Sardinia, and then in Italian, and wish the foreign guests a good continuation of the work, which for the inaugural session this morning will be translated in real time into English. Bona dias a totus sos presentes. Saludo cordialmente a sas autoridades inantis a sa senora ministra des Agricultura. Honrada Teresa Bellanova, de Sagale Commenti Organizadores, semus meda agradecidos e aconnurtados por su importancia que ha dado a custa iniciativa con sa presencia sua. Saludo a sos assessores e a sus índigos de sa cittade de Nuoro que nos intransiat fins a socanno, e sáteras autoridades, a sos professores e a sos estudiantes, totu de su curso de laurea in Scienzias Forestale de Nuoro, e concluende a totus sos convenidos. Hoy semus reunidos in videoconferencia por razones pandémicas connotas, pro che abbiamo anno forestale 2021 in un territorio come su di Nuoro con potenzialidades agroforestales mannas. In sas possibilidades de experimentaciones noas in questo settore zugent a aere un'attenzione de importo dai totus os organismos preposto in su territorio nazionale. Occanno, l'anno forestale è dedicato a sas politica agroforestales e a sos medios de ponere in campo pro firmare su cambio climatico e sas emisiones de gasos serra. E sos che partecipano a questa iniziativa ant a podere dare su contributo finza si scientifico de importo umano issoro. Do infinas sas auras a totus de un buono e profetus traballo. Continuiamo in italiano. Signore e signori, signora Ministra dell'Agricoltura, onorevoli assessori, signori sindaco e autorità convenute, è un onore per me dare inizio alle celebrazioni per la quarta inaugurazione dell'anno forestale della Sardegna 2020-2021. A questa cerimonia di inaugurazione, divisa in 2 sessioni come illustrato nel programma in vostro possesso, faranno seguito 2 giorni di seminario scientifico e tecnico internazionale sul tema dell'agroforestry, animato dalla presenza dei massimi ricercatori ed esperti del settore, in preparazione al congresso europeo che si celebrerà il prossimo anno qui a Nuoro. La parola agroforestry, praticamente sconosciuta fino a un paio di anni fa al di fuori di una ristretta cerchia di studiosi, è diventata centrale per le politiche di mitigazione climatiche dell'Unione Europea. Nell'ambito del Green Deal, il documento Farm to Fork della Commissione Europea considera le pratiche agroforestali uno dei cardini per garantire contemporaneamente la sicurezza degli approvvigionamenti alimentari, la salvaguardia degli agroecosistemi e del paesaggio, nonché il perseguimento degli obiettivi di Parigi sui cambiamenti climatici. La Sardegna e le regioni mediterranee occupano un posto di rilievo nella prospettiva di adozione generalizzata delle tecniche agroforestali, in quanto parte delle tradizionali pratiche agricole e zootecniche dei paesi rivieraschi. Dedicare la quarta inaugurazione dell'anno forestale della Sardegna a questo tema, che traccia la strada per gli approfondimenti previsti nel congresso EURAF del maggio prossimo, è il segno della crescente attenzione che la politica regionale e quella nazionale, impersonata dalla partecipazione a questi lavori della signora Ministra per le politiche agricole, alimentari e forestali, Teresa Bellanova, prestano all'argomento. Prima di dichiarare aperta la sessione per i saluti delle autorità, porto a tutti voi il saluto del Dipartimento di Agraria dell'Università di Sassari, che da oltre un ventennio impartisce qui a Nuoro i corsi di laurea e di laurea magistrale in scienze forestali e ambientali. Integrati con quelli di Sassari di agricoltura e zootecnia e di Oristano di tecnologie alimentari, il Dipartimento presenta un'offerta formativa e un impegno di ricerca completi, è in grado di contribuire fattivamente alla messa a punto e alla diffusione dell'agroforestry nella nostra regione e nel bacino del Mediterraneo. Ringrazio EURAF attraverso il suo presidente Patrick Worms e la vicepresidente Francesca Camilli per la preferenza accordata alla Sardegna nell'ospitare il seminario e il congresso. Il Consorzio per gli Studi della Sardegna Centrale per l'eccellente lavoro di organizzazione di questo evento, il Comune, la Provincia e la Camera di Commercio di Nuoro, l'Agenzia Forestas, della quale ho avuto l'onore di essere stato amministratore unico per 5 anni, e il Corpo Forestale di Vigilanza Ambientale per aver collaborato alla realizzazione di questa celebrazione. Così come un ringraziamento va a tutti gli enti e organizzazioni riportati nel programma per aver voluto partecipare attivamente allo stesso. Un grazie speciale al Service Tools che, oltre a questi 3 giorni, avrà in carico la gestione del congresso EURAF 2021 qui a Nuoro. Dichiaro perciò aperte le celebrazioni dell'anno forestale della Sardegna 2020-2021 e introduco le autorità convenute virtualmente a questa cerimonia per i loro saluti. La prima autorità che avrebbe dovuto intervenire è il sindaco, che mi dicono sia impegnato in un'attività di emergenza e pertanto appena si renderà disponibile introdurremo in video per i suoi saluti. È l'amministratore straordinario della provincia di Nuoro, Costantino Tidu, non è presente per impossibilità, e anche il presidente Giuseppe Talanas è in questo momento impegnato nei lavori di una commissione del Consiglio regionale e si collegherà domani per portare i saluti del Consiglio regionale. A questo punto chiedo al dottor Giovanni Caria, commissario straordinario Forestas, di intervenire per portare i saluti dell'Agenzia. Grazie. Pronto? Presente il commissario?
Saluti porgo all'amico naturalmente Andrea Cioddu, sindaco di Nuoro, cui da poco è stato rinnovato il suo incarico. Mi permetto anche di ringraziare gli organizzatori di questa manifestazione, che hanno fatto in particolare la Consorzio Universitario Nuorese, che ha fatto un enorme sforzo insieme ai suoi collaboratori per superare i vincoli e gli impedimenti dovuti in questo periodo alla presenza come sapete, della pandemia da Covid. E in particolare desidero rivolgere un vivo ringraziamento ai relatori e a tutti coloro che interverranno per illustrare le tematiche in discussione, senza dimenticare l'apporto qualificato che è certamente il contributo che è stato offerto dai nostri operatori ed in particolare dal dottor Salvatore Mele, direttore del servizio territoriale di Nuoro. Tutti sapete l'importanza dell'Agenzia Forestas per la sua importante e pluridecennale attività, che ha consentito in Sardegna di recuperare, di difendere, di conservare le importanti compendi e patrimoni forestali di cui dispone la Sardegna, portando anche un notevole contributo per la ricostituzione dei manti forestali che erano andati perduti a seguito delle attività orali, incendi ed eventi calamitosi. Forestas è impegnata con un notevole sforzo per valorizzare ancora di più il suo ruolo e la sua missione, intanto col potenziamento anche delle risorse umane che hanno consentito anche recentemente di far fronte sotto la guida del Corpo Forestale in contrasto agli incendi, alla piaga angustia alla Sardegna storicamente per i gravi incendi che la danneggiano. Pur essendo la sua diciamo, attività principale, il settore portante dell'attività, quella attività cantieristica che è presente sul territorio, Forestas diciamo, si propone da tempo di allargare il suo le sue competenze attraverso una collaborazione, diversi progetti di collaborazione con diciamo, organismi a carattere nazionale e internazionale per portare avanti progetti di ricerca e sviluppo utilizzando i finanziamenti regionali, ma soprattutto quelli comuni. A questo uno desidero ricordare uno dei più importanti di questo momento di questi progetti, che è quello del Living Agro, che si propone, all'occasione di questo convegno, anche la valorizzazione dei sistemi di Agroforestry, compresi quelli agropastorali e anche politici. Notevoli sono e impegnative le collaborazioni, in particolare l'ha ricordato il Purpurina con l'Università di Sassari, in progetti di ricerca e di sperimentazione. Mi piace ricordarne uno in particolare perché riguarda proprio la città di Nuoro, che è il progetto che si colloca nel compendio di Jacopi alle falde del Monte Ortobene, che è interessantissimo per la valorizzazione di sperimentazioni e ricerche nel campo delle filiere produttive forestali, della vivaistica e quant'altro. Importantissimo sono i progetti LIFE, qui Foresta collabora, sempre con la collaborazione insieme con l'Università di Sassari e il Corpo Forestale della Sardegna, per la valorizzazione dei centri di allevamento e recupero della fauna selvatica. Da poco abbiamo, assecondando le richieste che ci sono state formulate dall'amministrazione regionale, Foresta ha provveduto ad indicare una linea, diciamo, di intervento utilizzando le risorse del Recovery Fund per la ricostituzione e il riparo del forte degrado paesaggistico e forestale che ha colpito la zona del Sulci a seguito della secolare attività mineraria. È un progetto molto importante e qui speriamo di poter ottenere finanziamenti e quindi realizzare ed estendere ancora l'attività della nostra azienda. A gennaio si organizzerà la collaborazione della FAO, un forum internazionale per discutere delle principali politiche europee tese alla valorizzazione dei prodotti non legnosi in chiave produttivistica. Credo di poter limitare a questi piccoli cenni il mio
think these few mentions are enough, and I'd like to thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Caria. Thanks for giving us an overview of the activities of Foresta in the regional framework. They are co-founders of the forestry year. I'd like to give the floor now to Agostino Cicalo, President of the Chamber of Commerce of Nuoro, for his greetings.
Presidente, il dottor Cicalo si collegherà più tardi.
Va bene.
Okay, Dr. Cicalo will be connected with us later on. Dr. Simona Tidu, who's the president of Agriculture and Forestry Doctors, she can't be here with us for health reasons. And at this point, I'd like to give the floor to Mario Serpillo, who is the president of, who is a part of the Italian Farmers Union.
Pronto?
Professore, il dottor
sì.
Servillo mi scrive che può sentirci ma non riesce a parlare, sta tentando di...
Mario Serpillo will take the floor as soon as he can solve his technical problems because he can hear us but he can't speak. Okay, we have him here. I'm sorry, I had some technical issues, so I'd like to thank Professor Polina for giving me the floor. I would like to read my intervention, Mrs. Minister, and representatives for various entrepreneurs, associations and experts. I'd like to welcome you personally and on behalf of the organization I represent. I am honored to bring the contribution of the Italian Farmers Union at this important event in my land, Sardinia, and this is a precious occasion because it allows us to collect hints and new food for thought, for actions to better face difficulties that only yesterday seemed inconceivable. Our contribution to the fourth forestry year is an occasion to share ideas and to try to find a new relationship between forestry and agriculture in the light of the next EURAF conference in 2021. History of forests is as long as agriculture, but is quite disregarded, and agroforestry is almost unknown. In the common interpretation, for the forest seems disconnected to agriculture, and it is only conceived as the provider of wood, whereas my association is convinced that forests and agriculture and breeding techniques are one unity and should get together to give new chances to the rural areas, strengthen the economy and soil management. The focus group in 2017 referred to a scholar who 30 years ago stressed the fact that agroforestry systems are more complex than agricultural because they involve economy of the whole territory. Multifunctionality of forests should be better integrated with agriculture systems in line with the European Green Deal in order to achieve the ambitious goals dictated by future CAP policy with a sustainable system of growth and carbon neutral by 2050. Today, the cohabitation of forests and arable land and livestock farming and forestry, agroforestry helps achieving objectives which are more in line with our life styles. And they should allow us to go beyond agricultural systems and intensive agriculture, which is responsible for impoverishing our soils and our biodiversity in our rural systems. Which causes the depersonalization of rural areas. So we should be able to respond to complex challenges like climate change, but the thought goes to the maintenance of an increase of employment possibilities in agroforestry. The sustainable management of forests should pay attention to the benefits for the environment and the economy of our territories, and these benefits should be combined with support actions, also monetary support, to give financial resources through compensation systems. And finally, we should strengthen the adaptiveness of the forestry systems as a whole, in consideration also of the pandemic. And we'd like to reaffirm this importance of education. So we need better systems for forestry management that can exploit existing technologies The pandemic has revealed the weaknesses of our productive systems, and it is showing the limits of the value chains at a global level, but it also has included novelties in our lives, like continuous monitoring for testing the system and the research for better practice. Our commitment is to give value to micro enterprises which produce unique specialties and bring us back to our tradition and history. The recent presentation of the latest census on Italian economy raises concerns about the risk for closure of small enterprises and family enterprises with revenues up to 500,000 euro. Nowadays, we need to be ready to face any type of disaster, floods, forest fires, soil erosion, and we have to be more effective in reversing pollution, especially from microplastics, because it is changing our marine ecosystems and damaging fisheries. Many agricultural sectors are facing challenges. We have to fight against pesticides. We need to intervene effectively to learn and how to prevent the risks we are facing, and we need to be quick in implementing the systems offered to us by the science and technology. So we need to be humble and to act together in order to draft joint actions that focus on people in rural territories. Of course, we need resources and support to develop new productive systems. We need new procedures that help us overcoming today's uncertainties and to be able to build a better future for next generations. The Recovery Fund is a constant attention to next generation, and I'd like to finish by thanking you, thanking the University Consortium and the President for organizing this great event. We will support it with great interest, and I'd like to thank you all and wish you great proceedings.
Un saluto che non era formale, ma era un impegno da parte degli operatori agricoli e silvocolturali.
Thank you for your opening address. We are in the common ground of agroforestry for an effective implementation of these systems within our region and beyond. So thank you. Now we have the mayor of Nuoro, lawyer Andrea Soddu, and he will bring the greetings of his city and our best wishes for his recent mandate, his recent appointment as mayor of Nuoro. Mr. Mayor.
Pronto? Niente, mi comunicano che il sindaco non riesce a entrare nel
Apparently there are technical issues, so we can perhaps move on to the institution reports opening the forestry year. And I would like to ask all speakers to keep to 10 minutes. These are official reports, so there won't be any debate or discussions afterwards. The first report is by Mr. Antonio Casula, current commander of the Forestry and Environmental Monitoring Agency, or CORE, and former manager of the Foresters Agency. And he will talk about the fight against forest fires, a resource for the Green Deal. Thank you, and good day to all. This is an important topic and also innovative. The Green Deal project considers environmental challenge as a priority in the EU, and we have a strong commitment to support biodiversity and also the productivity of forests. The European Union can contribute to spread our agroforestry worldwide. The main aim is to avoid global heating, and we have to contain the increase in temperature globally. There is a specific goal, and in Paris 2015, the European Union made a commitment to be achieved by 2050. The first objective is also to shift towards renewables and decrease the emission of greenhouse gases in the European Union. And this requires the shift towards renewable energy. And this is an issue, especially where electricity is still produced from combustion. And there are also a number of human activities that are energy intensive. There are also new rules on building, insulation, and also the focus on public transport and promotion of biodiversity. And also the idea to reserve a quota, a share of European funds for biosustainability, ecological sustainability. We are in contact with the Department of Agrarian Studies, Agrarian Sciences of the University of Sassari to bring forward important initiatives. In Sardinia, as in the rest of the Mediterranean, we are affected by climate change. I can give you some figures about the trends in climate change and the size of the phenomenon. In the past years, from 2017, we have had a great amount of ashes from forest fire that has been released into the atmosphere. We have had an increase of ash release. In October, there was 14,000 hectares burnt in 1 hour. 2018, we had also a number of large fires, and we have also had casualties. People have died. In Sardinia, in the United States as well, there have been deadly fires and climate damage of $100 billion. In Australia, forest fires have caused the death of 32 people and 500 million animals killed, and hundreds of thousands of people had to be evacuated. And this has had a terrible impact, a dramatic impact on the environment in terms of ash release. And even Nordic countries that in the past were spared by this phenomenon have been affected by forest fires. And in the Mediterranean, in particular, we have more and more extreme events affecting also the interface areas. And in the past 60, 70 years, there have been depopulation of the countryside, of the forest areas. And so there has been an increase of flammable materials in these areas, no longer inhabited, no longer exploited. On the 1st of August of this year, we have had 29 fires. And in one day, 2,600 hectares were burnt, which was 1/4 of the total for the year, of which 800 hectares of wood, which was half of the total amount of the fire season. And in the fight against the forest fires, we need a revolution in terms of reaction. And there is So we need to work more on prevention and also on fighting the biggest fires, which are those that cause the greatest destruction. Scientific experience tell us that we must change our approach to the problem. We need planning, programming, reduction of flammable material, of woody material, and support to agricultural holdings, to workers of the countryside, to reduce the likelihood of triggering a wildfire and of its propagation. And so we should shift our resources not so much on reaction to the fires, to emergency management, but to planning and management of the land areas. Because these fires are the result of mismanagement of our forest resources, we need to organize communities that are prepared for fires and are educated in self-protection. And we provide support through our teams and also other tools to encourage cultivation area techniques and management techniques that can produce important results in terms also of livestock welfare and support a new green policy of the European Union. Thank you. Thank you, Commander, for your report, and especially because you represent, you talked to us about the important commitment and effort of the Forestry Corps. And we Sardinians are grateful for your effort. And you highlighted the importance of prevention and management. And this is something similar to what we experiencing with COVID. Because preventing is much more effective and cost effective than just reacting and responding to emergencies. Because, of course, just reacting to the emergency is more expensive and less effective than having prevention and control and land management approach. Thank you, Commander. I now see Mayor Andrea Soddu here with us, the mayor of Nuoro. I would like to congratulate him on taking up office as a mayor, and over to you, Mayor. You have to switch on your mic. Apologies. I am too in a way struggling with COVID. I have had the infection with the health consequences that you can imagine. And finally, today I tested negative, but I still have some symptoms, so I'm still convalescing. I still have to take it easy, so to speak. So, but I'm starting to work, of course, both on the COVID issues and all other issues. I'm very happy to take part in the opening of the forestry year, although this is on a remote basis this year. I would like to focus our attention immediately on a pressing issue, which recently during our electoral campaign, we focused on a theme to encourage our community and Sardinia in general. And the focus was on values. On values to build a collective awareness, our feeling of being a community at a time which is post-ideological. We no longer have strong ideologies to support us as in the past. political ideology. So what is the value uniting us? Of course, there is more than one value, but one of the main values, and maybe the key one at our time, and a time in which Sardinia, the Mediterranean and Europe forestry system is the theme of the environment and environmental sustainability. And with EURAF, with the next conference, we will focus on agroforestry, which is a way to harmonize the different needs of forests, of farmers, of livestock farmers, to make a happier world, to build a more sustainable world, a fairer world, that through focus on the environment and through prevention, as Mr. Casula said earlier, fires are disasters that affect the environment, but also can kill human lives. So through this value of the environment, of sustainability, we can also fight against the inequalities, against the poverty, both material and cultural poverty, and create opportunities for sustainable development that do not destroy our resources. So this is why this event is very important, because it builds a link between institutions, agroforestry bodies, universities, research, the forest agency, local authorities, regional authorities. So altogether, all stakeholders must work on a project to change Sardinia. We are like an island in the middle of the Mediterranean. But we could, from our central position in the Mediterranean, also act as a driver to spread this project on agroforestry to the rest of the Mediterranean. We could be an example, we could be a model for our neighbors of how we can couple sustainability with economic development, with initiatives such as today's. So I truly hope, and I'm convinced, that we can all contribute to build the system of awareness, of knowledge, and of working to build this value and democracy, because democracy is based on participation and can be strengthened by this cooperative effort, and Sardinia can be a leader in defending these values at world level. And so I truly hope that this is the case, and my best wishes from myself and the municipality of Nuoro. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this political and policy support, and also for the great hospitality of the city of Nuoro to the opening of the forestry year, and also to the EURAF conference next year. So I will now give over to the next speaker. We have Mr. Salvatore Mele, who is the director of the Territorial Service of Forestas Agency in Nuoro. He was the general manager of Forestas, and I would also like to meet and to welcome another member of Forestas. And Dr. Mele is currently also a teacher of history of forestry science at the University of Sassari in Nuoro. And I would also like to thank him for this contribution as a teacher. He will talk about the contribution of foresters for carbon sequestration on a regional scale. Thank you, Professor. And chairman of this important initiative. I would like to greet all attendees. Special welcome to the authorities present, the Mayor of Nuoro, the Extraordinary Commissioner of Forests, and of I will now show you some slides to introduce the topic, which is carbon sequestration.
Allora, l'argomento, come vi dicevo, è un argomento.
The topic is very complex. On these aspects, obviously, there are calculations that are complex to understand the size of carbon storage at world level. The biosphere structures that are more important in terms of carbon sequestration are tropical forests. Many think that in the next decades there should be plans for carbon immobilization, but nothing has been more effective than natural sequestration, that is in the biosphere. So it is the biosphere that must resolve the problem of storing carbon in the earth, and man should give a contribution by limiting CO2 emissions. We know that a temperature increase in the world is due to human emissions of CO2. Why are we talking about the importance of tropical forests? They have a limited size. They're just 5% of world surface, and they are the most important deposit of carbon. And they absorb 50% of human emissions over the year, 1.5 gigatons of CO2 per year. So it's important and it's fundamental to rationalize and limit tree felling in the tropical forests. Tropical forests are already small in size, and if they are further reduced in size, we face the prospect of huge amounts of carbon being released into the atmosphere. So they are currently 4% of world surface, but they have 40 to 50% of carbon present in total world vegetation. So blocking cuttings and fellings in tropical areas would, just blocking these fellings, we would reduce 30% of CO2 release worldwide. And then we should also consider climate change, especially in the area closer to us. North Africa in particular is very delicate. In Sahel, we can see that climate change leads to sandstorms. In the Middle East, out of 365 days per year, about 300 days will have sandstorms. And this, in 2017, a sandstorm in the Sahara actually even reached Brittany, obscuring the sun and causing, let's say, release of dust of the sand from the atmosphere that then falls onto the ground. And even in Sardinia, we often receive rainfall that has sand in it. The Forest Agency is giving its contribution because from the international viewpoint, the countries of the Sahel have made an agreement to create a band of vegetation of about 15 kilometers from Senegal to crossing over to the other countries. So we have an agreement, Sardinia has an agreement with Senegal to to build plant nurseries for use in forestry and in agriculture. In these countries, vegetation is totally different from ours. There are plants that are very hardy, that resist in drought conditions. As to the calculation of carbon sequestration, carbon storage in Sardinia, we have some calculations carried out by APAC and by ISPRA. In particular, it's not easy to make this calculation, so we have used as a parameter the reforesting, replanting of trees in terms of carbon accumulation. We started from calculating the surfaces that were reforested in Italy from 1990 to 2000, and the replanting of trees is has a peak in 2000, after which it decreased significantly. And this happened in Italy, but also in Sardinia. So we have a situation currently with a decrease in carbon sequestration through reforestation, and also in other types of vegetation. We have a decrease in reforestation, and also agriculture nowadays is highly technological, is scientific, and that does not take into account, let's say, techniques to reduce carbon release. So which are the types of plants that in Italy give the greatest contribution to carbon sequestration? It's mostly coppice woods. This is scientific datum that coppice forests are very efficient in carbon sequestration. And then, of course, on the other hand, we have forest fires, which release CO2 into the atmosphere through combustion. But with regards to coppice, we have a strong accumulation, fixation of carbon. And whereas with coppice, we have more fixation than in other regular forests, because the decrease of average age is linked to this fixation. And then we have here the figures on reforestation in Italy. Here we have data on the surface. Poplars, 1990, 7,000 hectares. That was a peak, and 8,000 also, 9,000. And then we have resin producing trees. And you have the main is the red pine tree in northern Italy, the red pine, 300 hectares in 1990. And then this figure decreased sharply in 2000. Whereas in southern Italy, we have had an increase in pine replantings, and then we have other broadleaf plants. We have 13 hectares in 2000. We built a model to count the carbon storage in the reforested areas. So we measured surface area, volume, and what we found, we were able to build this chart, and the measure is in hundreds of thousands of tons, and we had a peak in 2000, and then we have a sharp fall, and we dropped down to, and it's by 2040, we expect a further drop in reforestation, and this is linked to the plan, to the expectation of a sharp climate change that will affect European vegetation, and especially in the alpine areas. For instance, contributes to reforestation, to planting. We are also committed to managing existing forests, to managing coppices, reconstituting forest cover, and preventing, of course, fires, preventing and fighting fires. With regard to the comparison with the rest of Italy, shows that Italy has a total surface, including Sardinia, of 300,000 square kilometers. Sardinia has a tenth of the surface area of Italy, but it has much more woodland than the rest of Italy. The average in Italy is 22%. In Sardinia, it's more than 51%. And with regards to reforestation in Sardinia, Antonello Mele, in 2008, estimated that reforestation in Sardinia covered about 75,000 hectares, both for wood production and for forest management. So an average of about 650 hectares per year. So reforestation is about 1/10 of the national datum. So presumably also carbon storage in Sardinia is about 1/10 of the national amount. Here we have figures in Sardinia. In 1995, 30,000 tons of carbon were accumulated in the forests, and the peak was in 2000, the year 2000, when we had the peak also in reforestation. And so the peak is in 2000, 48,000 tons of carbon, and then we have a decrease, 2005, 30,000 tons of carbon, and then we have a stabilization of 15,000. Why do we have this expectation for 2040? In Austria, Austria is one of the countries with the strongest forestry organization, and they expect serious problems for their vegetation, and even the disappearance of some types of trees, and they want to change, they're planning to change types of trees. So the spruce and the larch, they expect both the spruce and larch not to be sustainable anymore in the future in Austria, and they expect to have to go to replace these trees with hardier trees. In Sardinia, we are already experiencing problems with some tree species. For instance, the holm oak in Sardinia is nowadays experiencing problems, and because we have a decrease in rainfall. And so Sardinia will have to work to protect our Mediterranean biosphere and create the conditions to reduce or contain climate damage from the increasing temperature, and to be able to continue with the carbon fixation. Dr. Melek?
So, sorry if I intervened, but we have little time, and now I have to introduce the next presentation by Professor Flores, Professor of Entomology at the University of Sassari. I'd like to ask him to keep within the time allocated to him, which is 10 minutes. Thank you, Ignazio.
Mi sentite? Sì, buongiorno a tutti. Saluto e ringrazio gli organizzatori e le autorità e saluto tutti i partecipanti. Veniamo subito al tema, il tema della promozione e lo sviluppo dei prodotti forestali non legnosi, lo sappiamo, è un tema di attualità da decenni, è una delle aree prioritarie del Dipartimento Forestale della FAO dal 1991, con l'obiettivo di migliorare, diciamo, l'utilizzo sostenibile dei sistemi forestali, contemperando, diciamo, l'esigenza di conservazione della biodiversità con il miglioramento delle produzioni del reddito. Nel contesto mediterraneo, delle foreste mediterranee, anche rispetto ai sistemi forestali, date le funzioni ecologiche, di questi sistemi, tali risorse assumono un ruolo sempre più rilevante anche rispetto ai mutamenti socio-economici in atto,
in consideration of the socio-economic changes of the rural areas, in order to promote the development of the rural areas, and this goes especially for Sardinia and the inner areas of our island.
Scusate, forse non ho lanciato la presentazione.
Sorry, I probably didn't launch the presentation.
Ecco qua.
Here it is.
Quindi veniamo al progetto del Centro Agroforestale Mediterraneo. Questo è un progetto che ha avuto un iter abbastanza lungo, diciamo, di anni.
Had a very long preparation.
Non vedete?
I'm sorry, but we can't see the presentation.
No, Ignazio, vediamo soltanto il desktop con...
No, we can only see the desktop.
Non si è. Mi dispiace.
It seems it cannot be open.
Mi dispiace, non so cosa dire.
I'm really sorry, I don't know what to say. Please just give me a second.
Non so se... Qua non mi fa agire adesso con... No, sta caricando però, perché è un po' pesante per le immagini, diciamo.
Okay, the presentation
Io posso continuare
is
intanto,
heavy,
visto...
because of the images. Please keep
Quindi il progetto
within
del
the
Centro
10 minutes.
Agroforestale Mediterraneo, diciamo, ha avuto questi iter
Of the
abbastanza a lungo
Mediterranean Agroforestry
ed è stato
Center
portato
had a
avanti
long
all'insegna della condivisione.
preparation,
Ha
but
visto
was
come
based on the
protagonisti, oltre a
sharing and
Nuoro, il Dipartimento
involved
di Agraria dell'Università di
Nuoro and
Sassari,
the
enti locali,
Department of
il Comune, l'Agenzia
Agriculture of the
Forestas in
University of Sassari,
particolare,
the
ma anche il mondo
municipality, the
produttivo
Forestas
attraverso le
Agency, but
associazioni, le
also the
imprese, i
productive
territori e così
world,
via. Si è giunti quindi
enterprises and the
ad una sorta,
territory.
possiamo dire, di patto
And
territoriale tra tutti i
we've
soggetti
reached
coinvolti,
a kind
volto a
of
individuare obiettivi comuni
territorial
di
partnership
sviluppo
aimed at
condivisi e basati appunto su
identifying
criteri
shared
di
development
sostenibilità. Il progetto, non so
goals
se non vedete
based on
ancora probabilmente,
sustainability.
giusto? Mi
Probably you
dispiace
can't
per questo
see the
inconveniente. Il
presentation. I'm
progetto è
really sorry
articolato
for
in
the inconvenience.
una
The
serie di
project
attività che tengono conto
sees
appunto della
various
produttività
activities,
dei
taking
sistemi
into
forestali
account the
mediterranei
productivity of the
e che io vi elenco
Mediterranean productive
brevemente,
systems, and I'm
che
going to
riguardano
list them.
appunto la
They
frutticoltura
regard
montana,
mountain
incentrato sulla
fruit growing,
valorizzazione
focused
e
on
la
the
gestione delle specie
valorization and
arboree,
managing
castagno, noce,
of
nocciolo,
the tree
ciliegio,
species
pero,
like
melo
chestnut,
e altri
walnut,
frutti minori,
hazelnut, cherry,
con
pear, apple, and
caratteristiche
other minor
ecologiche,
fruits with
fisiologiche, ci
ecological and
riferiamo ovviamente in
physiological
particolare ai genotipi
characteristics.
locali,
And we are
che
thinking
garantiscono
of
la compatibilità
local
e la produttività in tali
genotypes
contesti.
that
Naturalmente
ensure the
parliamo di
compatibility
risorse
and
che già
productivity
vengono
in the mountain
sfruttate
area
e
for the
l'obiettivo
inclusion in the crops with
del
the aim
progetto
of
è quello di riqualificare
achieving
questi settori attraverso produzioni
the
più regolari,
requalification of these
omogenee e di elevata
products,
qualità.
trying
E in
to
questo
have a
progetto, in
homogeneous and high
questa
quality
attività è prevista la
productions.
collaborazione del
In this
CNR,
activity,
di
we
Agris,
collaborate with
di
the
tutti gli enti che hanno già
National
operato in
Research
questo ambito.
Center, Agris,
Un'altra attività
and all
riguarda le
the
produzioni
institutions
orticole
that already
montane, anche in questo
collaborated in
caso
this
parliamo di un
sector.
settore
The
che nelle zone interne ha
second
avuto
work
un
package
suo
regards
successo
mountain
anche a livello
horticulture,
imprenditoriale, un
which
inizio
was
di
successful from the
utilizzazione
entrepreneur point of view
di
because
risorse
it used
presenti a livello
local
locale anche da
resources,
parte di imprese e anche qui con la
and
collaborazione degli enti che vi ho appena citato si
here
prevede appunto di
also with the
riqualificare
collaboration
questo
of the
settore.
aforementioned
Poi
institutions
ovviamente
with the aim of
un'attività riguarda la tecnologia
requalifying
del
this
legno, del
sector.
sughero e
The other
delle
regards
biomasse
wood
rinnovabili. Anche
technology,
qui
including
parliamo
cork and
soprattutto di
renewable
miglioramento della
biomass, and here
produttività
we want to improve
sia del legname che
productivity
della
of
risorsa
timber
supericola,
production, and
con l'acquisizione di nuove
also
conoscenze di carattere
cork
applicativo
production
che
with the
coinvolgono
exploitation of
appunto
a new
soprattutto l'università e l'Agenzia
knowledge.
Forestas, anche con le dotazioni e
Therefore, we want to
infrastrutture che ha
involve the
importanti
university by
l'Agenzia
using the
Forestas.
existing infrastructure of the
Un'altra attività ancora
Forestas
riguarda la protezione dei
Agency.
sistemi
Another
forestali
activity
mediterranei, mi
regards the
riferisco alla protezione
protection
sanitaria dei sistemi
of the
forestali mediterranei,
Mediterranean
che è oggetto di
forestry
attenzione da
resources,
sempre da parte della nostra regione, rispetto per esempio agli epidoti defoliatori
and
ad
the
altri
protection of
fitofagi chiave
pollinators
che
and
creano diciamo emergenze
phytophags,
da questo punto di vista periodicamente nei nostri boschi
which
e contestualmente
constantly
anche
cause
con
problems in our
uno
forests.
sguardo attento anche a quelle che sono
We
le
want
risorse di
also to pay
interesse
attention
artistico.
to the
Poi un'attività riguarda le produzioni
beekeeping
zootecniche
resources.
montane,
Another regards the
sempre che farà
mountain
leva sulle risorse
livestock
genetiche
breeding
autoctone, diciamo,
using
con
local
un'attenzione particolare alla
breeds,
filiera dell'allevamento
and especially
suinicolo,
as
ma anche
regards the
dei
pig
bovini
production on the mountains,
da carne
but
rustici
also
locali, senza
a
trascurare ovviamente
local
l'allevamento bovino-caprino.
meat
Poi si
cows,
prevede l'istituzione di
but
2 centri
also paying
sperimentali.
attention
Presso
to
tutte
sheep
queste
and
attività
goat
avranno una concentrazione
breeding.
particolare a
All
livello
these
sperimentale
activities
presso l'azienda Jacopio,
will
è già
be
stato detto
experimented by
da
the
chi mi ha preceduto, dove nasceranno anche 2 centri sperimentali, quello di
company.
apicoltura
We will
e
have
di
two
micologia,
experimentation centers
che puntano a
for
valorizzare ancora
beekeeping and
meglio queste
mycology
risorse.
to valorize
Il centro
even
apicoltura
further
ovviamente
these
sarà una base
resources. The
operativa
beekeeping
per
center
lo
will be an
studio delle
operational
api
center
locali e delle
for
risorse
studying
mellifere,
local
dei mieli
bees and
e anche
local
fornendo un
honeys,
servizio alle imprese del
and it will
territorio.
also
Il centro di
provide
micologia si propone di rappresentare soprattutto
advice
un
to
riferimento,
local
sottolineiamo, di studio, perché esistono anche
companies,
altri
but
centri
it will
proprio
also
nel settore,
study
di studio sui funghi idrici, sui
mushrooms
tartufi con l'obiettivo di una diffusione di queste risorse
with the aim of disseminating these resources in local natural forests. And then there's a last activity which regards the valorization of civic lands. We already have centers operational at a regional level. The specific aim is to produce documents at a digital level that could be used for professionals and administrations and for all those who operate in this field. I'd like to finish here. Unfortunately, I don't have the slide, but I'd like to give you an example, because beyond all the examples
un esempio che si basa anche sull'esperienza di questi ultimi anni in collaborazione con l'Agenzia Forestry che riguarda l'agricoltura. Patrimonio boschivo pubblico regionale, c'è una potenzialità enorme di sviluppo di questo settore che è niente, progetto Restart, con livelli occupazionali, parlo di dati riferiti anche a studi e casi di studio già realizzati in questi anni, con livelli occupazionali che possono arrivare a 200 unità lavorative, con l'esercizio di un'attività pienamente sostenibile in questo ambito e che può quindi rappresentare un esempio, diciamo, concreto di quello che sono le potenzialità produttive delle sistemi forestali mediterranei attraverso le varie produttività. Vi ringrazio e mi scuso ancora per l'inconveniente
So thank you all for your attention, and I'm sorry for all the inconvenience caused by the presentation. Thanks to Professor Flores. The slides will be available for our participants so they will be able to see them. Thank you. Since we're late, Dr. Moredo will give his presentation at the first, in this second session. So let's go to the presentation of Professor Antonello Sana, who's works at the Department of Architecture at the University of Cagliari, and he studies territorial systems and landscapes, and he's going to talk about traces of humans in the forest landscape of Sardinia. And I'd like to thank him for being here at this
io che ringrazio te, Giuseppe, dell'invito.
Giuseppe,
voi non
for
mi vedete,
inviting me. You can't see me, probably.
Vediamo se...
Can you? Yes, you can now.
Perfetto, perfetto. Allora, io adesso prendo rapidamente lo schermo per...
I am going to share my screen.
Ecco. Datemi conferma che...
Please confirm whether you can see it or not.
Ecco, benissimo, d'accordo. Va bene. Allora, vi renderete conto che tra tutti voi io sono probabilmente quello che si è dovuto fare più domande per chiedersi in che cosa il punto di vista dell'architettura, che è la materia che io insegno e su cui lavoro, sia pure intesa in senso molto ampio, no? Anche estesa ai temi del paesaggio, per esempio, come ben sa il professor Purina, con il quale abbiamo in atto una straordinaria collaborazione da diversi anni, con lui e col suo dipartimento, proprio sul tema dei paesaggi rurali.
So I had to ask myself a lot of questions, especially what could be relevant
Non so se sono riuscito a cogliere, ma molto rapidamente adesso io scorro alcune diapositive
I don't know if I achieved this goal, but I'm going through some slides that could be considered as eccentric.
Il 14 ottobre del 2020,
the 14th of October 2020, the President of the European Commission,
Ursula von der Leyen, al Parlamento europeo un documento intitolato Renovation Wave for Europe, Greening Our Building, Improving Lives. Per la prima volta,
for the first time,
una sorta di piano Marshall per l'ambiente costruito, come ho provato a definirlo nella slide che segue. Il documento è pubblico ed è datato 14 ottobre
document is
2020
public
ed
and
è
has
la
a
prima
date of
volta,
the 14th of
ripeto,
October
che
2020,
in
and it
maniera
is the first
centrale
time
il tema
that at a
dell'ambiente costruito, ma
central
nell'accezione
level
appunto del green, della
and in the
creazione di lavoro, cioè della cointeressenza
with the
della
idea
società
of greening
all'insieme
society
delle problematiche più ampie, culturali,
and in the
eccetera, con
framework of the wider problems
un'annunciata
of
mole dei lavori appunto da piano Marshall. E poi
the
Improving Lives,
environment.
cioè no, è il tema della
And it is
pandemia
interesting
che
because the title
giustamente
says Improving Lives, which interconnects with the idea of the
l'insieme delle
pandemic
politiche europee.
that
L'ho voluto
affects
dire
the
perché
whole
noi siamo qua dentro
of
in un contesto
European
in cui
policies
anche
and
diciamo, la
politics.
presentazione della vostra iniziativa inquadra
We are here
nelle
presenting
politiche
your
agricole europee,
initiative
lo specifico
in the
dell'agroforestry.
framework of
E
your
poi in
EU
generale siamo
policies
tutti
and agroforestry
collocati
in
un
more
momento che
specifically,
io
we are
eufemisticamente ho definito complicato, ma che
going through
anche
a complex,
da molte parti si
complicated
tende a ritenere
moment.
un'opportunità, per quanto terribile questo
But
possa
it could
apparire,
also be
sul tema
conceived
dei
as an
rapporti natura,
opportunity
tecnologia,
to
società, no? Perché di
rethink
questo che stiamo
the
parlando.
relationship
Collochiamo, se
between
vogliamo,
nature, human
l'architettura dal
beings and
lato
society.
delle
So let's place
tecnologie, benché
architecture
sia
on the
anche
side of
per molti,
technologies,
e io condivido
even
questa posizione,
though
una scienza che si
architecture
colloca
is
nell'ambito
also
delle scienze sociali, una
science,
pratica,
a social science, because it is
oltre che una
also
scienza.
a
Allora,
practice,
siamo
not only
tutti
a
talmente
science.
immersi nelle grandi
So we are
crisi,
so
di cui le
immersed
relazioni precedenti ci hanno tutte
in
illustrato una serie
the current
aspetti
crisis, and we
di
saw them all
straordinario
in the previous
interesse, no? Da quella
presentations.
della pandemia che ci tocca nel corpo e che quindi è
From the
particolarmente
pandemic, which affects
diciamo,
our
per noi
bodies,
pregnante, ma alla grande questione del climate change, e non sono due
to
cose
the
diverse,
climate change,
che possono
and
essere
they are no
iscritte
different,
nella
but they
crisi
all fall within
del rapporto
the general
uomo-natura,
crisis in the relationship
dell'uso
between
sociale delle tecniche nei confronti
humans and
dell'ambiente,
nature, and
che sono
the
anche però,
relationship
ripeto, la
between
prospettiva della necessità e
technologies
forse
and
della possibilità
environment.
di un cambio di paradigma.
But they
Certo,
also
se
offer
estrapolassimo
a new
i
perspective
dati
for
sulla
change
crisi,
of
sul crollo della
paradigm.
capacità del
If
foreste
we
di
took
catturare
the
la
data
CO2 che ci venivano presentate un
of
attimo
the
fa, devo
ability
dire,
of forests
insomma,
to
siamo
fixate
saremo al capolinea,
CO2,
no? Eppure
then we will have a solution. But
se questo cambio di paradigma
if
diventa
this change of
realmente
paradigm
strategia e politica, e per
becomes
questo la scala europea è
strategy and
straordinaria. Non ho
policy,
cominciato con la Sardegna, non posso cominciare con la Sardegna, per quanto la mia
and
teoria sia che i
the
luoghi
European policies
nel
give
tempo
us
della
a great
globalizzazione devono
chance.
diventare sempre più rilevanti, ma queste sono
Places need to become more and
nello
more
stesso tempo
relevant.
questioni che riguardano l'intero pianeta.
And these are issues that regard the whole planet.
L'altra cosa che mi perdonerete è questa,
you will pardon me
il lavorare per un minuto intorno a questa
if
immagine.
I work around this image. You can probably see
che è la copertina.
It's the image.
Bene, la copertina del saggio sull'architettura dell'Auger, no? La Bibbia
the essay sur l'architecture
della cultura dell'enciclopedia, no? Basta la data,
which is the pillar of the culture of encyclopedia,
nel mio campo, nel campo
drawn in
dell'architettura.
1753.
Qual è il ragionamento? L'immagine
And
la
what's
vedete,
the thought behind
no?
it? You can see the image. It's
fantastica
really
donna
clear.
che,
It's a beautiful woman.
regge in mano la squadra e il compasso, indica la cabana originaire, no? L'archetipo dell'architettura, il grado zero, no? Dell'architettura, che è tutta, da un certo punto di vista, rapporto con la natura, i tronchi, le fronde, no? Ma evoca nello stesso tempo, vedete, io non sono in grado di farlo vedere col cursore, ma in alto a destra l'immagine è quella del timpano del tempio greco, che in effetti noi sappiamo storicamente ancora, senza andare troppo lontano, cioè diciamo nell'800 a.C., un attimo prima della sua pietrificazione era in Grecia. Allora questo non è soltanto per dire che esiste una connessione originaria dell'architettura con la natura, ci mancherebbe altro. D'altra parte, se passiamo alla scala superiore delle città, noi sappiamo che la città è il prodotto della rivoluzione neolitica, cioè della rivoluzione agraria. Quindi la connessione tra i nostri mondi è come dire, originaria, no? E però il fatto è che in quel momento, 1750, è 10 anni prima della macchina a vapore, no? Il momento germinale della rivoluzione industriale, 40 anni prima della rivoluzione borghese, della rivoluzione francese, diciamo così, stiamo proprio ragionando la scienza di un cambio di paradigma fondamentale che porta, che ha fatto di noi quello che siamo naturalmente. In 250 anni e insomma la tecnologia ha fatto
in the last 250 years, technology has taken huge leaps, but we're still thinking about the relationship with nature. And I think this is extraordinarily interesting to see your initiative, because we are trying to, you are trying to see the same issue from a different point of view. These are the structures of the Illuminist thinkers. Reading you can see the house of the rural guards, or the structure of the river house by Ledoux, specifically great architects of Illuminism and Napoleon architects. They ask their questions in these terms, but these structures tell us something, they speak to us.
Vediamo un attimo. Allora,
let's have a look.
Sardegna, prima si diceva forse 1/10 della capacità, se ho capito bene, di cattura dell'anidride carbonica, pur essendo non 1/10 della superficie territoriale nazionale, una straordinaria presenza addirittura per il 50% di superfici boschive. Io dico, per una volta noi che siamo stati stigmatizzati per questa questione di essere marginali, a bassa densità, periferici, spopolamento eccetera, forse no? Con la pandemia, col tema del cambiamento climatico, ritroviamo una nostra centralità. È chiaro che il rapporto, se io dovessi stare al tema che mi ha assegnato Giuseppe, dovrei dire, certo, questa foto dei primi del Novecento di Orgosolo ci racconta i suoi muri in pietra, i suoi materiali locali, naturali, questa straordinaria consonanza, diciamo, con l'ambiente intorno, certo, insomma, poi l'occupazione di suolo, perché è chiaro che anche la Sardegna, malgrado la straordinaria pervasività dei paesaggi agro-silvo-forestali, tuttavia ha moltiplicato per 10 la sua occupazione di suolo dal punto di vista proprio dell'edilizia, così come del resto è capitato in tutta l'Europa. E forse se il paesaggio di Orgosolo lo guardassimo oggi, con questa diramazione, dilatazione di queste periferie, in mezzo al paesaggio dei boschi, insomma, è possibile che si capisca perché il mondo dell'architettura e dell'urbanistica è attraversato da una forte autocritica rispetto a questi temi. Vero è che non è sempre stato così, ecco, sempre per tematizzare, ma le scorro adesso in un attimo, no? Le foto per esempio dei luoghi del sacro, no? Ecco, l'architettura, luoghi del sacro, paesaggi boschivi.
That shows the architecture of sacred places, or this is the picture of the water places.
Insomma, è diventata una piccola garden suburb, una piccola città giardino che forse non è esattamente quella che si richiede in questi contesti di alto pregio e di alta valenza ecosistemica. Lasciamo perdere gli aspetti estetici. Qui stiamo proprio parlando delle questioni sostanziali, cioè come dice Ursula von der Leyen, bisogna tornare a un green building.
said we have to go back to a green building
per i bisogni umani,
that is shaping the environment to human needs for living, for producing, in line with the new
che l'Europa ha finalmente preso in mano.
of the new systemic guidelines adopted by the EU. Let's take Badesaliges in Bologna. Now there's a contradiction between the original town center, which is enclosed in nature with its own geometries.
L'intervento che non è invece il pulviscolo che vediamo in alto a sinistra, no?
But we can see
del
in
caso
the
per
top
caso a cui
left
si è assistito negli ultimi decenni.
what happened in the last 10 years, the heaviness with which infrastructures have been included in the landscape on the silvo pastoral landscape.
Volare velocemente, ma nel parco di Pula
on this is the Pula Research Center,
il polo tecnologico, diciamo,
the technological pole, and you all know this.
Si può far di meglio,
we can do better.
Qui siamo in
The
Brasile,
whole world is teaching us this. We are in Brazil here. I had to skip a lot of good of pictures of good practice that give the idea of belonging, the idea of reusing local natural materials, which is very interesting as well as significant, culturally significant. So I'm going to end with this image because this is the reason why I was called to participate in this meeting. Our coordinator is a strong advocate of the fact that crisis allows for intersectoral tools. We cannot avoid meeting different worlds, different topics, different sectors, which normally are not really able to collaborate and to talk and offer holistic solutions to societies. And I'm going to close here. The extraordinary message that is coming from the European Union while they are redrafting CAP, they are promoting a renovation strategy for greening our buildings, creating jobs and improving lives.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie Antonello, grazie professor Sanna per questo innesto importantissimo del segni dell'uomo sul territorio rurale.
Professor Sanna, for your report. I will now give over to the next speaker, who is Mauro Agnoletti, teacher at the University of Florence and scientific coordinator of the National Observatory of the Rural Landscape for the Ministry of Agricultural, Food and Forestry Policy. We'll talk about the forest landscape. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for your invitation. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Welcome to the international colleagues connected to this session.
I would like to bring you the greetings of the National Observatory of the Rural Landscape, which has a section on historical rural landscapes. And I would also like to bring you the greetings of the Scientific Committee of the FAO Heritage System, which is the main UN program for the conservation of agroforestry systems. And these agroforestry landscapes and systems have become important also in light of the COVID emergency, although maybe not many people know this. we have recently carried out a survey with the European Central Bank, and you will see the report on the website of the European Central Bank and on my website, and it shows that in Italy at least, the systems with low energy intensity vis-à-vis those with high energy intensity are those with a much lower level of infection vis-à-vis COVID infection vis-à-vis other systems. And this suggests that these areas are safest in terms of lower risk of infection, and the European Central Bank proposed as a program for future development programs under the CAP and the Recovery Fund to enhance the value of these areas, so to revitalize agricultural areas with these aspects that could be fundamental also for the new development model of which many speakers have spoken. To address the topic, we can talk about the vulnerabilities of this system. In recent years, we've seen a polarization of the relationship between intensive agricultural forest areas and urban areas. So in the past, there was an integration between all these areas. Nowadays, these systems are separated from each other. And this has created, on the one hand, a high energy intensity agricultural areas that cover in Italy 23%, and the remaining areas, 67%, in which are low development or economic depression, high rate of abandonment, depopulation, and this certainly does not support economic development. So these areas don't have a development project, a development idea, which we should develop, on the contrary. So we have seen, for instance, we have heard about forests and climate change, but in Italy, from the post-World War period onwards, we've had a large process of reforestation. We've had a doubling of wooded areas, about 70,000 hectares per year increase, but these are, and a loss of 10 million hectares of agricultural areas. We're talking about 1/3 of the country. We should reflect about this, because we're talking about agri-forest systems. So we're not talking about dense, thick forests, but we're talking about systems with a high tree component. In Italy, in the period in which these systems were widespread from the north to the center, we had even more than 150 trees per hectare that provide environmental climate functions, but also breeding functions and production functions. So if we wanted to bring together again these agroforestry systems and the different elements and connect them with each other again. So today we should reduce this polarization between agriculture and forest, and consider the landscape not just from an aesthetical viewpoint, but as a paradigm that integrates economy, society, and environment with a vision that considers the physical structure of the territory and the economic impacts. So these are systems that produce food, high quality food in many cases, and also these systems have a landscape value, which together with tourism can create identity values associated to the territories, and these can be drivers for a different development model. Countries such as Italy and also other countries in the Mediterranean and the world, we we can never think of having large production with low labor costs. If these countries where costs are higher, especially because we're talking about land areas that are not flat, that are not easy to till. So we should talk about quality, focus on quality production that is on a smaller scale. And we should also consider the environmental aspect. These systems have a very high biodiversity. Often biodiversity is considered also on alpha level, that is biodiversity in natural environments. But scientists know that there is alpha biodiversity, but also gamma biodiversity, that is biodiversity between systems, between different production systems characterized by different level of presence of trees. So there are different levels of biodiversity. We have the level in the Amazon forest in Scandinavia, but also in biodiversity in the agroforestry dimension. And this biodiversity, if you don't know it, has been recognized by programs by the United Nations. For instance, biocultural biodiversity promoted by the Convention on Biological Biodiversity, UNESCO, biocultural biodiversity, which is an approach to biodiversity of the FAO-GS program. So the target of biodiversity should include these aspects. So we've heard this morning much about this topic. I will remind you that these systems that are in environmental, social, and economic situations that are very different in the various parts of the world are the result of adaptation to different environmental and climate situations, and that are also changeable and changing, because 10,000 years ago we had places that now are forested in the past were open prairies. So we must be aware of these changing aspects. And also CO2 absorption. We know that in our latitudes, olive groves absorb more CO2 than woodland. And this is, we know this from scientific studies. So agroforestry systems offer opportunities also for carbon sequestration, and also other problems in our country, such as hydrogeological instability, the presence of rural activities and maintenance on wooded areas can help contain land instability, hydrogeological floods, and so on. So the presence of human activity in these systems can also offer flood prevention benefits. So we have the social aspect, and also we need to rebuild social relationships in rural areas that have been degraded by depopulation, the flight towards the cities, abandonment of the countryside. And so there is, so focusing on these landscapes can also help us rebuild a social texture in these areas, which also requires offering services. And this is an ambitious goal also for Europe and for the world. And the FAO program has this ambition. What are the tools we could use to pursue this goal? First, I would like to remind you that in Europe, the Interministerial Conference for Forest Protection in 2003 identified three main pillars for sustainable forest management: the ecological pillar, economic pillar, and socio-cultural pillar. which means that forests are also the result of cultural processes. In Europe and the world, different communities have developed different ways of relating to the forest component, which creates diversity in terms of structure, extension of forests, and also their specific composition with a gradient that is influenced by cultural aspects. So apart from economic and social aspects, there's also the cultural aspect to be considered, which has been somewhat neglected by the 40 countries member of the Interministerial Conference. But if at European level we wish to move towards a new greening, a new development model, let's not consider only forestry, forest planting. Italy has more than doubled its forests, and this has happened across Europe, but also in America, Japan, Korea, in large parts of China. But what is important is not only planting new forests, but also rebalancing components within the landscape. Also because if we stop cultivating and producing food from our agricultural land, we will need to import from other parts of the world, whereas agroforestry can offer food production, quality production, that in a way that integrates the agricultural, forest, and livestock components. And Sardinia has models it can offer, because in the various climate conferences in which I have participated, apart from general declaration, we also need to look for models that we can apply, and so Sardinia can offer a model. Another aspect is programs such as CAP, the CAP, which is a test bench for what we're talking about. Will the CAP really focus on this alternative, on this possibility? Also, even just in environmental schemes to propose agro-silvo pastoral components. At the Bonn conference, there was a consensus both on the climate side, on the biodiversity side, and this seems promising, and also for the economic aspects. I have also participated as a coordinator of a working group on rural development, but there is a lot to be done for effective implementation in reality of these proposals. We need to invest also in terms of vision, strategy, action, and we need objectives that are measurable and achievable in the CAP. And as to other programs, there's the FAO, the FAO's program that is it's a program with pilot areas in many countries, and even in the United States, that for many years have been against this type of vision. Even the United States have given their support to diversification of the various forms of cultivation, because it cannot be just a single model that is good for all areas. Different areas in the world need different approaches, and these systems are the more flexible because they don't focus on maximizing production and on having a constant yield under any condition, but they are adaptable to the different environments and different socioeconomic characteristics in Italy. And I will close here to keep to my speaking time. We close with the National Agency on Historical Rural Landscapes attempts to offer an alternative model. We started moving slowly, but after 7 years, We have 23 sites that are members, 15 applicants, and the aim is to establish links between rural communities, landscape, and we have had a greater number of sites joining our organization. This is a bottom-up need and approach, and so I have a feeling that from these local territories and communities, there is growing awareness of the need to explore different development models, while hoping that the institutions, the authorities become aware of this need and support its implementation. And with this I close. Thank you, Professor Agnoletti. Thank you for your clear and timely presentation. And the information you're giving us is really important and relevant for our policies at the regional, national, and international level. I would like to thank all the speakers of this institutional session. I won't draw conclusions because each report has been clear and exhaustive. We have Assessor Lampis who has joined us and will be with us in the second part of today's program. But before closing this session, we have now to award the prizes. There is a prize for the best student in the degree course in Forestry and Environmental Sciences of Nuoro. This is the prize in the name of Antonello Mele. And the winner of the prize is Ms. Agata Marunchedo, who presented a degree thesis on agroforestry, sustainable agroforestry. And I would like to congratulate and a virtual round of applause for her from all participants and scientists and experts in agricultural and forestry sciences for her achievement. We would like to ask her to take the floor and say a few words. Good morning. I am truly honored. I would like to thank you for this recognition. So these were truly 2 words, very few words indeed, and the prize will be handed over to her by the commissioner of the consortium, so please don't forget to pick it up. I will now close this session. We are fairly on time. I will now hand over to Fabrizio Muredu, the commissioner of the University Consortium, and please stay all online. We also have Minister Bellanova later today, and I would like also to greet Patrick Worms, who is online. Patrick?
Yes, hello. Sorry about that. My microphone was muted.
Ciao, Patrick.
Hello, everyone.
Pronto? Mi sentite?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Francesca, I can hear you.
Buongiorno, mi sentite?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I am asking for help.
Yes, we can hear you.
The technician?
Perfect.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, great.
Good morning,
good day to all
ladies
of you.
and
Welcome.
gentlemen. Welcome. I'd like to start by thanking all the participants
all attendees,
who
all
answered
participants
to our
who have joined
call,
this initiative.
to this initiative, and
Polina in
especially
particular,
Dr. Polina,
who has
who really helped us.
given significant help,
this COVID
despite the fact that many of us have fallen ill with
our
COVID, including myself.
I've just started to be fully operational myself.
After being down with the COVID.
And I'd also
so
like to thank all the people connected here
and also
and the guests
members of this panel of the second session.
table we are just launching. Before giving the floor to the speakers, I'd like to spend a couple of words and make a couple of considerations.
Since from the first edition, we have
I followed the development of the various programs since the first edition, and all the topics
themes that have been
go through the evolution of the topic we are discussing today.
Trace the evolution of the theme that we are addressing today.
I'd like to remind you that the forestry year is very important for institutional partnership with our region,
the forest agency,
the local authorities, Forestas, all the institutions,
researchers, and also the world of the economy, so the Chamber of Commerce,
the University of Sassari with the Department of Agriculture. So
it's very important to have collaboration between all these stakeholders and to strengthen this networking. And this is
shows the
right approach to these issues.
To this topic, we need
integrated cooperation between all governance levels
around the guideline on the
environmental protection of the agroforestry heritage
resources.
First and foremost, the agency, the protection agencies, but also
the economic
coupling this with the economic exploitation and
the agroforestry
valorization of these assets of this heritage.
Because we can't valorize a heritage without protecting it, and there's no sense in protecting a resource if not to giving it value, also economic value. And so tourism, wood exploitation have gone along the lines of these lines we all believed in. And today's ceremony and the 4 international sessions that will follow, we show this has a partner. The fact that we believe in this is shown by the fact that we created the project Restart and a study center funded by territorial funds, and thanks to the province and the municipality of Nuoro, who invested over €5 million over various years for research and skill transfer to young people. And that means that the basic of territorial economic development has to go through an economy of knowledge. So territories have chosen to allocate sums to territorial planning to give a central role to knowledge, and especially for the young. The program foresees the recruitment of some researchers in agroforestry in the path creation and valorization of the territory. We also have to thank the region of Sardinia, which has allocated the above-mentioned funds to territorial development program and to partner bodies, especially the Forestas agency, which is a historical partner that supports university degrees in agroforestry sciences. But it will also be a partner in promoting the research center Restart that has a line called specifically agroforestry. And this concept is present since 2008 in the foundational documents of the Restart Research Center. So we are proud to have been pioneers in this initiative, which is now moving concrete steps and will develop in the near future. So after my brief introduction, I'd like to now we will have a short institutional session, and we will declare the forestry year open. So I'd like to give the floor now to Patrick Worms, who is the president of the European Federation, to which of which we are all members, who has already been in Nuoro last year and will be there again in next May for the 5th European Congress. Welcome, Patrick, and I'd like to give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. I must say it was an absolute pleasure to discover your lovely town.
Grazie, è un
Oh, hang on, let me just change something. I'm getting confused here. It was an absolute pleasure to discover your lovely town and your beautiful island when I came to visit it last year. And I was distraught when we could not have the meeting in May, in October. And I'm sure I join all of us if I say that we dearly hope that by May of next year, the COVID situation is under enough control so that we can finally have our Congress and enjoy your hospitality again. A question to the organizers. In my understanding, I was supposed to make my 10-minute presentation after the one of Francesca Camilli. Has that been changed? Hello?
Sì? Sì.
Yes, my question is whether I'm supposed to give my presentation now or wait my turn after Francesca's, which is what I thought would happen.
No, io in ordine ho prima Patrick Worms e poi la...
in the program, we have first you, Patrick, and then Francesca. But it's the same,
Okay.
really.
All right, it is absolutely the same. Right, in that case, allow me to share my screen. There we go. Can everyone see that? I assume everyone can see that?
Sì, sì.
Wonderful. Well, we've already had a very good introduction to the fundamental issue that is facing us on a changing planet, notably with Professor Mele. But I thought what I would do is to give you a broad brush view of how foundationally important it is to do what we are trying to do here. The first thing to understand is that humans have been modifying the climate of this planet for a very long time. When we started discovering the various ways of doing agriculture between 5,000 and 10,000 years ago and started cutting down forests, flooding rice fields, etc., we already started putting greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and that is why we enjoyed the extremely stable climate we've had for the last 10 years, because astronomical data alone should have led us slowly back into a new ice age, and clearly that was not on the cards even before industrial revolution started. Now, of course, the Industrial Revolution is what we are dealing with today, and the massive increases in the emission of greenhouse gases. Now, the world has known about this for a long time. It has known about this since the 19th century, and since the early 1990s, it has actually decided that this was sufficiently worrisome that people had to do something about it. And what did the world do? Talk. Because that's what the world does best. So we had something called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, whose second objective article was to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations at a level that would prevent dangerous changes. And what you see on this little beautiful little chart here is a list of every single conference of the parties, superimposed upon which you have a graph of the increase in greenhouse gas emissions on this planet. Clearly, talking has not worked. And the reason why it has not worked is because of this. And this is probably the scariest chart I have ever seen in a business publication. It was in the Financial Times last November. And all that it shows you is the increase in greenhouse gas emissions and carbon dioxide emissions for a number of countries on a logarithmic scales. And we tend to think of this problem as being a problem to do with the rich developed countries, which are the ones on the left. But look at the ones on the right. The Kenyas, the Ethiopias, the Senegals, the Mongolias, the Lebanons, the Yemens. Each and every one of them are beginning to emit more and more and more carbon. And the reason for that is simple. Carbon is the best drug ever invented. It's better than heroin, it's better than speed. Everybody is mainlining it. Everybody's mainlining it because it gives you such an extraordinary degree of comfort. And that, of course, is a massive problem, because we are completely off track to keep the planet within 1.5 degrees or even within 2 degrees. Right now, we are happily sailing off into the unknown, into 3 or 4 degrees of change. And as those of us who study these issues know, therein lies disaster. We might see areas of the world with wet bulb temperatures exceeding 35 degrees, which could lead to millions of deaths in a few weeks. We are seeing areas of the world that are forested today, like the Amazon, that risk turning into savannas. We are seeing vast ice fields in Greenland and Antarctica collapsing, which may rapidly raise sea levels. We cannot afford the degree of catastrophe and change that this brings, yet we love carbon. Part of the reason we can't deal with it is similar to the reason we seem to find it difficult to deal with COVID. When a threat is imminent, when you've got a lion in front of you, or when you've got an evil virus that threatens to kill you, you lock up. But you can only do that for a few weeks. After that, you get tired. You want real life to resume. And we are seeing this problem with COVID today. With climate, it's even worse. Yes, those of us who worry about landscapes see the impacts of climate change today already. But the vast majority of people live in cities. They don't really see it except when they switch on the TV. But as far as they're concerned, life carries on as normal. Meanwhile, the problem gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and will play out over decades, centuries, even millennia. And the really bad news is there is no magic bullet. Solar panels are not going to save you. Electric cars are not going to save you. Nuclear power is not going to save you. Nothing in particular is going to save you. Now, you can make money from climate change, and you can make money in non-fiction, for example, writing books like The Uninhabitable Earth, or you can make money in fiction, like, for example, A Ministry for the Future, which I've just finished reading. I will tell you one thing in there. They save the world, but they save the world by some pretty dodgy means. And the reason why these books sell more and more and more is because despite the fact that most of us can't see climate change, we are beginning to get seriously worried about it. And of course in Sardinia, you can see it day to day. This is a picture from one of the fires that you had over there. And you know, this was discussed earlier on today, that there are management ways in which we can deal with this, but we also know that irrespective of management, the risks of such fires is getting worse and worse and worse as the island dries out and as the temperatures grow up. So, is it time to panic? Well, not quite. And there's two reasons for that. The first reason for that has to do with the fact that agriculture, forestry, land use is a big fat chunk of emissions. Whether it's a third of the total, the chart on the left, or a fifth of the total, the chart on the right, is actually pretty irrelevant. What those charts symbolize is A, that it's really difficult to measure, and B, no matter what the actual reality of the measurement is, it's a big chunk of the total. And why is that encouraging? Because all of that can go away without us compromising our ability to grow the food, the timber, the wood, the fiber that we need. It's a question of management. That's the first reason to be hopeful. The second reason to be hopeful is that while there is no magic bullet, there is a magic pizza. There is a pie comprised of many, many different slices, each and every one of which can contribute to us stopping to put carbon in the atmosphere and getting the carbon that is already in the atmosphere back somewhere where it cannot do any harm. And if you list the various slices, you get, oops, sorry, that's coming later. So you have this hope, and it doesn't matter what you're a specialist in, and of course we are specialists in forestry, in afforestation, in agriculture, and we can immediately see while looking around this pie that there's a great deal of these slices where we have something useful to offer to the world. And of course, when we take all of that and try to summarize it in a single word, the word we use is regenerative agriculture. And regenerative agriculture covers a whole range of practices that all have one thing in common. They leave the land, the soil, in a better condition after you've harvested the crop than before you started farming it. And there's plenty of examples that are extremely familiar to us agroforesters. They are the silvopastoral systems, which of course we know from Sardinia-like landscapes or Mediterranean landscapes at the bottom left, but which also operate in Northern Europe at the top left, in the extreme north around the pole in the top right, or in the Sahelian band in Africa at the bottom right. They are the silvo-arable systems, and what I've chosen here are systems that are mechanized, just to show that these systems are not necessarily opposed to modern industrialized mechanized agriculture. And you have examples here from top left in Zambia, in England, in Sri Lanka, and in France. And you have the most productive agroforestry systems of all, the polyculture systems. These tend to be traditional systems like the one you see at the top left, the chaga gardens in Tanzania, or at the bottom left, these vanilla, banana, coffee and cacao gardens in southwest Uganda. But they can also be modern and infused by the discoveries of modern agroforestry. At the top right, you have an oil palm polyculture in Brazil, which is more productive just from the oil palm than an oil palm monocrop plantation, yet has so much more to offer. And at the bottom right, you have a farm in the United States that was until 15 years ago just a maize monocrop and is beginning to become far more productive in terms of nuts, fruits and livestock. You even have that sort of thing in grasslands. Look at these pictures. Grasslands cover a vast percentage of the earth, and the way that they are managed naturally before humans got involved is because predators and prey ensured that the grasses kept on thriving. If you copy how that happens, you have the results that you see on the left of the fence at the top left. If you don't copy how that happens, you have the result you see to the right of that fence. Obviously, these are exactly the same lands with the same soils and the same climate. The only difference between these two sides of the fence is the management. So since we know how to do it on the left, there is no reason why we cannot spread that management around the world. And all of that is extremely helpful because as you render landscapes more complex, here taking the agroforestry examples, then obviously you're going to be producing more carbon, and some of that carbon is going to stay in the soil, which is where you want it to be, and the rest of it is going to be useful for people, either as biomass for timber, or as food, or even as biofuels. And the same thing is happening in grasslands. If you look at this chart, for example, which comes from the American prairie, you notice that the endemic grasses that grew there before the land was plowed up for farming have extremely deep roots. And these roots pump carbon into these soils. They build up those soils. By contrast, what we call pastures today, especially the improved pastures that are common where I live in Northern Europe, tend to have very short-rooted grasses like the ones we have on the top left. The only way to keep that growing is to add lots of fertilizer, since the roots are not deep enough to pick up the nutrition that's naturally down in deeper soil layers. And of course you need to use a lot of irrigation because it dries out really quickly in terms of drought, which doesn't happen with deeper rooted species. So ecology teaches us that we have a way of managing landscapes for human productivity and eco-services. This does not need to be an either-or situation. It can, indeed, it must be a win-win situation. And that is recognized by the experts that look at this. This is a chart on land use interactions with climate change produced by the International Panel on Climate Change. And what do you notice? Things like agroforestry or improved grazing management perform very highly on mitigation, on adaptation, on combating desertification, on combating land degradation, and on food security. And best of all is that last column, the cost. They are cheap. They work and they are cheap. Unlike electric cars or solar panels or nuclear power stations, they are dirt cheap. The difficulty is twofold with them. The first difficulty is it's really hard to measure exactly how productive they can be. This is a study from 2013, and these guys estimated that in Europe alone, agroforestry could mitigate about a third of emissions from all sectors in Europe. Great news, right? But of course, it's being contested. And the reason why it's being contested is because it's so hard to measure the carbon fluxes in agroforestry soils. What you see here is the results of a long experiment carried out at INRA near Montpellier in France. And all they did was compare where the root distribution is in a forestry system on the left and on an agroforestry system on the right. What this charts measure is the amount of rootlets over depth. And as you can see, in the forestry system, most of the roots are close to the surface. In the agroforestry system, most of the roots are deep under the surface. Most protocols for measuring soil carbon today will take samples only on the top 30 centimeters of the land and measure the carbon in there. If you do that, you would come to the conclusion that forestry is far better able to capture carbon than agroforestry is, and that agroforestry is a disaster and you should get out of it. Obviously, if you measure it over the whole soil horizons, you come to the conclusion that the agroforestry system is better at capturing carbon, because instead of just putting it in the top 30 centimeters of the soil where it can disappear into the atmosphere again when conditions change, you're putting it 2 or 3 or 4 meters down, where it will take far, far longer for that carbon to be emitted as carbon dioxide again. And the problem with getting that into policy, with getting that into financial contracts for carbon capture, is that measuring this is really expensive. You need to dig holes and you need to count rootlets just to build your model. And this was done for one tree species. There are thousands of tree species used in agroforestry systems around the world. You'd need to do something similar for all of them. So, not surprisingly, people are trying to find proxies. And we at EURAF, I work for EURAF, the World Agroforestry Center, have done a fair amount of work on this. And so we're using satellite imagery to try to estimate what's happening to soil organic carbon. And yes, as you can see from these two charts, there are relationships, but it's not a nice linear relationship. The scatter graph is all over the place. So it's difficult to give policymakers what they want. And policymakers want to know, how many tons of carbon can I capture if I plant some trees? Investors want to know exactly the same thing. How much money can I earn by capturing how many tons of carbon by planting some trees? And that is one of the fundamental difficulties we find. Still, even if we leave these difficulties aside, just to reassure you that they are a solution, here is this pizza pie again, except it's the list. And what this list does is it calculates what all of these different interventions can give us in terms of total atmospheric CO2 equivalent reductions in gigatons. And the first thing you notice is that the things that the media likes to talk about are only 3 or 4 of the top 20 solutions. The things that interest us, the way we manage landscapes, is over half of the top 20 solutions. In fact, if you just add up these numbers, And again, they have to be taken. They are, they are averages, and who knows if they are underestimated or overestimated. So they are averages. They have to be taken with large error bars. But if you add up all of that, and you imagine that the world understands this, and that the foresters, the ranchers, the farmers, the regulators, the investors begin to understand this and move the world into managing landscapes in those directions, we could get somewhere around 50 parts per million of the carbon dioxide that's already up there in the air and suck it back down into soils. That means we are from 411 parts per million, where we are today, down to 360, and what's estimated as being the safe level over the long term is about 350. It's a massive, absolutely massive potential. Thankfully, it is spreading. It's spreading slowly, despite the fact that it's so difficult to do so from the perspective of policies around the world, but it is spreading. And we find that already over 40% of all agricultural land around the world has at least 10% of tree cover on it. We are the future. And most of the farmers in the world, in their own way, with their own trial and error, are slowly beginning to realize this. And indeed, if you are interested, you have more and more resources to this. And this book in particular, which I warmly recommend, is an absolutely fantastic resource. It's an encyclopedia of how to use agroforestry, perennial farming, multi-cropping and all that in order to grow food and fiber, make money while capturing carbon. So resources are beginning to be out there. Of course, I don't have to tell you that it's great for adaptation as well. This kind of landscape burns, this kind of landscape doesn't burn, this kind of landscape gets destroyed by storms, this kind of landscape doesn't get destroyed by storms, this kind of landscape has a lot of soil erosion, this kind of landscape does not have a lot of soil erosion, this kind of landscape has a lot of water erosion, this kind of landscape does not have a lot of water erosion. We know all that. We even know today that this medium tree cover, which is typical of agroforestry system, is the best possible tree cover to recharge groundwater resources, to recharge the aquifers that were overpumped in so many parts of the world. So the evidence is overwhelming, and it comes from all areas of the world, that the future should look like this. But still, we face a conundrum, and that's the second issue. Why does the world more and more look like this, if the future is supposed to be that? Well, first, especially in Europe, labor is really expensive, whereas capital is really cheap, especially these days. So investing in a tractor and some diesel is going to be a lot cheaper than investing in some workers, and this kind of large-scale monocropping system is ideally suited to a universe in which capital is cheap and labor is expensive. Second, never underestimate the power of the input industry and of large industry to dictate the discourse. You've all heard this, the feed the world narrative. My God, we're going to be so many more people in 20 years' time. We need to increase agricultural production. We must feed the world. And that is understood to mean we must increase global calorie production. And how do we do that? Well, we breed new seeds and specialize and breed new livestock things. And we develop those for large-scale farmers that can be efficient. And in order for that to work, we subsidize these large-scale farmers, and we encourage the small-scale farmers to please get out, because the large-scale farmers can take care of it. And these large-scale farmers supply the commodities, the very limited number of commodities that the giant processors and traders around the world are turning into the crap food that most people buy in supermarkets. And those businesses, they invest a lot in R&D, and they frame that question. And remember, most politicians are not experts in this issue. It's easy for them to be convinced by this argument, not because this argument is right, but because this argument is the one you hear the most often. In advertising, they say that there's three things that matter most: repetition, repetition, and repetition. And this particular discourse is repeated ad nauseam, which is why it influences politics so much. Then there is something that we all carry in our hearts: a deep belief in progress. This is a picture of New Street, city in Birmingham in the north of England, the city of Birmingham in the north of England, and that picture was taken in the very late 1930s. This is a picture of the same area taken in the 1950s. Look what happened here. What happened was a belief that we should segregate. Here, everything was mixed up. You had factories, shops, housing, restaurants, social life, schools, all in one place. Here you have a shopping center, which is connected by motorways to factories, which are connected by motorways to offices, which are connected by motorways to residential areas, etc. This idea of segregation is one that infected agriculture as well. In an earlier part of my career, I worked in the former Soviet Union, and I picked up this poster from Soviet times. And it was a poster that was designed to show the world that Soviet agriculture was so much better than capitalist agriculture. So it's a poster about agriculture, but the color scheme is red, not green. You don't see a single plant or a single animal in there. What you see is a factory, probably a fertilizer factory, and a line of tractors marching proudly into the future. That still infects us today, which is why it's easier for us to understand that a large monocrop field is productive than to understand that some mixed up mess of trees, animals and crops are productive. And that means, too, that we have become seduced by the toys that we got under the Christmas tree of modernity. Inputs, pesticides, herbicides, improved seeds, improved fertilizers, irrigation, diesels, machinery. And we forgot the fantastically productive farming systems our forefathers evolved over trial and error, adapted to their local context over periods of millennia. And that has consequences. If you have a farm and I'm Syngenta or Monsanto or Bayer or whoever, I'm going to make between 50 and 100 euros a year every hectare from your farm by selling you stuff. And this is an oligopoly. There's half a dozen to a dozen big companies around the world in this business. So they've divided up the world's farmers between themselves, so they each make massive amounts of cash flow. Whereas we, agroforesters, well, we give advice. We give management advice. So if you're a farm, first you're going to have to find out who is a trustworthy advisor and who isn't, which is difficult, as opposed to simply buying a bag of stuff and reading the instructions on the bag. Secondly, that consultant's going to ask you maybe for 1,000 euros a day. Whoa, that's really expensive. You're going to need him for 3 or 4 days, and you're going to pay him 3,000 to 4,000 euros. But think about it. You will have paid 3,000 to 4,000 euros once, and then your system is established, and you can do it by yourself. Whereas if you are a 100-hectare farmer that's buying inputs every year, you are giving 10,000 euros to the input businesses every single year. The input businesses make the money but seem cheap. The agroforestry and agroecology consultancy businesses do not make money but seem expensive. And that, of course, means we have difficulty financing research, we have difficulty financing marketing, and most importantly, we have difficulty influencing the political process. And that marries with another toxic thing. We are animals. Yes, we're very clever animals, but we are still animals, and our brains are pretty small compared to the complexity of the real world. So we divide the real world in management terms into boxes, into silos. So we have a Ministry of Environment, a Ministry of Climate Change, a Ministry of Agriculture, a Ministry for Fisheries. But of course, the real world, everything is mixed up. Nutrients and gases and water and genes flow between each of these units. So our management processes are not adapted to the real world. And you can see that when you look at the Common Agricultural Policy. I'm not going to go through this chart in detail, but this simply shows you how fiendishly complicated it is if you're a farmer to try to understand what exactly you're allowed to do and how much you're going to get paid for it, or even worse, if you might lose your subsidies if you get it wrong. Not surprisingly, a lot of farmers are going to stay away from it. It's too complicated. And as we saw in the CAP reform process and the European Parliament, influence, money talks. Most of the sensible amendments that were suggested to ensure that the new Common Agricultural Policy was reflective of the European Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy were rejected. And they were rejected for, if you look at the details of the arguments that were given, frankly, bullshit reasons. But they were nevertheless rejected. And that's because the influence of people who do very well from the current farming system. So, as we progress over the next 2 days, as we try to understand how we can use the framework of the new Common Agricultural Policy to encourage farmers to adopt these more productive, more resilient, better for the climate, better for biodiversity farming systems, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. You may have been confused by a lot of what I said earlier on, or simply because of the difficulty of translating between English and Italian. But I hope I've left you with an impression that these are good things that need to be done. But no matter what landscape you're in, it needs to be context adapted. Obviously, you're going to do it differently in a poor landscape in Niger than you're going to do it in the rich landscape of Sardinia. But Niger and Sardinia have one thing in common. They both depend on the keystone species to make it work. And that keystone species that has to make it work, which is always the same around the world, is of course us. Thank you very much.
Grazie Patrick per l'intervento, per il contributo.
Thank you, Patrick, for the contribution, scientific contribution and values that you transmit.
EURAF per l'Italia, alla quale facciamo le congratulazioni perché è stata.
I'd like to congratulate her because she's been.
Anche la vicepresidenza in seno a questa organizzazione. Quindi congratulazioni e ti cedo la parola, Francesca.
Grazie Fabrizio, io farò un saluto in italiano e poi passerò all'inglese.
Thanks Fabrizio. I will switch into English. I'd like to thank the local organizers. Thanks to Professor Pulina because he made it possible to collaborate between EURAF and Sardinia. I'd like to thank you as the head of the local organization for the enthusiasm that you have devoted to this adventure, and thanks to Barbara Argiolas and Barbara Trudo because they made it incredible work. I would like to thank the colleagues who are joining me in this job from the Scientific and Organizational Committee, which has made an incredible work, and I'd like to mention the head of the scientific committee, Professor Spano, the colleagues of the organizational committee who collaborated in the organization of this online event. And lastly, all the colleagues of EURAF, especially Patrick Owens. You've only heard him. He showed all the enthusiasm and support in organizing this event together with Jerry Lawson and Mr. Lubner, as well as all the other colleagues who are actively collaborating and are supporting us in this. So I'd like to switch into English.
Say a few words about the EURAF. And EURAF is a federation of 21 countries. Actually, it's a federation of 21 national agroforestry associations from 21 countries, and is formed of an executive committee, which is formed in turn by an executive board and the national delegates and subdelegates. And I must say that now the Italian delegate is Alberto Mantino, so just because of the new election, Alberto is having this role right now. EURAF gathers more than 500 members, and we are very happy about that because this number has increased during the last 2 years, and we hope that it will increase further on. This morning, agroforestry has been explained. Of course, we are in Sardinia, so the agro-silvopastoral systems and the silvopastoral systems have been the most mostly cited. But agroforestry is something which can be applied to all agricultural systems all over Europe. And it's important not only because of the productive issues, not only because of the economics, but also for the landscape. And I'm very happy about the presentation of Professor Agnoletti before, because the landscapes of Europe can be preserved through the agroforestry systems. And coming back to EURAF, which is EURAF mission. EURAF's mission is to spread the agroforestry importance. EURAF wants to promote agroforestry systems and practices all over Europe, of course, but also the mission is to promote the research, which is at the basis of agroforestry. And the research must also be transferred. So the mission is also to transfer the scientific results to farmers and to extensionists, to technical assistants, and also to foster a dialogue with the policymaker and with the decision makers, which is something that we want also to do during this event we are going to have the next days. And which are the tools to promote agroforestry? There are many tools that EURAF has developed during the year. But one of these tools are conferences, because conferences are the occasions when people gather, when farmers, when policymakers, when technicians, when researchers can gather and exchange knowledge and to debate and can raise the knowledge on agroforestry in this case. And in 2018, so 2.5 years ago, Italy candidates to host the 5th European Agroforestry Conference in Sardinia, in Nuoro, and we started this adventure, as I've called it before. This conference, as you all know, should have been in May, last May, but it has been postponed twice, and because of the COVID pandemic. So this has been a sort of earthquake, I must say, for all of us, of course, and also for EURAF2020 organizers. It has been tough, but we didn't give up. So we decided that we should keep on organizing this conference, hopefully in presence, but in the meantime, we thought also that it was important to keep a relationship with all those people who have already contacted us, who had expressed the intention and the wish to come to Sardinia. And we decided to organize an online event. So the event which are going to leave next days, tomorrow and the day after. And we decided also to dedicate this event to the policy, to agroforestry and the policy in the new common agricultural policies. It's not a casualty, of course, this one, because the 2020 is an important year in this respect. So it's a crucial year, and we wanted to try to create an occasion where all these people I mentioned before could confront themselves on agroforestry issues. In Europe, of course, because EURAF is a European federation, but not only in Europe. So during this event, we'll have also the 2 testimonies from 2 countries which are not European, from USA and India. We think that to confront ourselves also with other countries in the globe, it's important. I would like to highlight that we launched this discussion on the new policy and agroforestry from Italy. And we are very honored and we are very glad about that, because in some way we are the center of the attention. But we are happy not just because we are EURAF2020 organizers, but also because we want to launch a heartfelt appeal, a sort of message from the Mediterranean, which is not a message just for the Mediterranean and just for Italy, but it's a message for all Europe. We have to launch this message because the climate and environmental crisis. And Patrick, in his presentation, has focused on that in a very, heartfelt way. And it's exactly from the region of Europe that tomorrow we will start speaking about policy. And we will start this travel across the regions of Europe to know why agroforestry policy has been successful in some cases, and why it has not been successful. And we will try to understand also the reasons about that. And we try to understand also which can be the suggestions for future improvement of agroforestry policy. And this will happen tomorrow, and the day after, the debate will move to representatives of different organizations, European organizations, and the European institutions, for example, DG Agri, DG Klima, DG Environment. And in the final session, we will have a roundtable to further discuss with other stakeholders. And the meeting will end with 3 young researchers. So we have asked 3 young researchers to make a synthesis of what has been said during the 3-day event, but also to indicate the guidelines for for the future of agroforestry policy, guidelines which can be highlighted, but the concepts and comments and ideas which have come out during the meeting. So in the very end, we think and we hope to say arrivederci to Nuoro next year in May, 17th, 19th of May 2021. Thank you very much. Sì, io ho finito.
Grazie Francesca.
A voi.
Grazie mille per l'intervento. Ora ho 2 comunicazioni di servizio. La prima è che l'assessore Murgia.
I have 2 service communication. Murgia has technical problems, and so he will connect on the 18th during the 4th session. Unfortunately, Cosimo Durante is telling us that the minister was called by President Conte for a Council of Ministers, and so she won't be able to be here. And she is postponing her presence in Nuoro 2021. So since things are like this, I give the floor to Lampis, who is going to close, and I'll give the floor back to him for the launch of the forestry year. So we are approaching the end, and I'd like to give to ask I'd like to give you the floor.
Prego, Assessore, grazie di essere venuto, la do la parola.
Grazie a voi tutti, grazie per l'invito che anche quest'anno avete voluto riservare alla Regione, alla Giunta regionale. Naturalmente in principio mi corre l'obbligo di portarvi i saluti del Presidente Cristian Solinas, che anche lui avrebbe voluto oggi partecipare.
I'm giving you the welcome from the region of Sardinia. This is a time when the presidents of the regions are very much committed to maintaining the institutional architecture. And everything is devoted to maintain and to intervene in this terrible time.
Protezione civile con le strutture sanitarie sono in campo con uomini, mezzi e quanto tutto possibile stiamo mettendo a disposizione per consentire la sicurezza, la salute delle persone. Grazie perché anche quest'anno il Consorzio Universitario di Nuoro ha ritenuto di dover mantenere una tradizione.
Thank you, because the Consortium of Nuoro wanted to keep the tradition and remind us our forestry heritage is a resource for development, and we need to take care of it. Nowadays, forestry policies are the mirror of an ever-changing world, and I'd like to thank everybody and welcome everybody who's taking part in this meeting, all the regional structures.
Sentito il comandante Antonio Casula, l'agenzia Forestas, il dottor Mele, il commissario dottor Caria, con poi le persone che insieme a lui hanno seguito questo intervento. Saluto l'Università di Sassari, i suoi professori e tutti gli altri docenti universitari che oggi hanno voluto portare il loro prezioso contributo a dimostrazione del fatto che su questi temi il Consorzio Universitario di Nuoro sta ed è riuscito a fare squadra, a portare anche strutture non prettamente regionali all'interno di un grande lavoro che è solo rimandato. Qualcuno prima di me ricordava quella che doveva essere il nostro appuntamento di maggio di quest'anno. Mi piace pensare che quell'evento sia solo rimandato perché la nostra terra, la città di Nuoro, abbia tutte le opportunità, tutte le caratteristiche per poter ospitare quel tipo di evento e soprattutto per poter far parlare di sé su ambito nazionale. Dico questo perché, come spesso ho ripetuto, qualcuno l'ha sentito sicuramente più di una volta, noi...
Some of you have heard it more than once. As a region, our aim is to ensure that our island is a beacon in environmental policies as a driver of economic recovery. Clearly, the current situation is a situation in which we are maintaining and containing a system which is affected by the global pandemic. This must not affect our vision that we can all design to work towards the recovery once the pandemic is over and we can resume our face-to-face meetings and our human relations and also focus again on the economic development of our island. This year too, the themes of forestry, forestation are an opportunity for us to reflect on the current situation of Sardinia, which is affected by depopulation. It is a long-standing problem, one of the most severe handicaps for the management of our rural and forestry heritage. And personally, and I believe also on the part of the regional government and the political class, we do not want to give up. We don't want to accept as inevitable this trend of innovation, of transfer of people to the cities. This is a strong trend. The population is flowing towards the main cities on the island, such as Cagliari, Sassari, Oristano, Nuoro, and Olbia. This, we must do what we can to counter this trend and develop initiatives to ensure that the rural areas, the small towns and villages of the region can keep living. And today, unfortunately, they are left to their own devices by the authorities, both the national and local authorities. Today, soil consumption is one of the themes on which we should reflect, because we see also from the viewpoint of urban development, we have a spread of settlements, but let's say the suburbs are expanding, so we have an increase of urban areas, but the inner cities and the inner towns are being neglected. And at the same time, people are moving away from the rural areas, the small towns and villages, to the main cities in search for better life opportunities. Agroforestry can be a tool to rebalance the needs of agriculture, forest management, and livestock grazing, to find a way of harmonizing these different activities, focusing on common development opportunities and also income opportunities for our communities. The region of Sardinia is addressing these issues. We've done it in our regional strategy for adaptation to climate change. In our first draft, we included the theme of agriculture and agroforestry. And also, another important connected aspect is hydrogeological risk management. So this requires safety measures that also involve protecting our forests. We have had a very heavy fire season with large incidence of forest fires. We tried to see the figures and the trend over the past decade. What is positive for the second consecutive year, we have had already some improvements, but this must spur us to work even harder to achieve even further improvements, to spread good practices for territorial management and conservation protection. The regional strategy for climate change adaptation has given importance to forest management and to agriculture, and the responsible management of agriculture and forestry by the authorities and also by private operators. The Foresters Agency is a beacon, an example of how the institutions, the region of Sardinia, focuses on maintaining our forest resources. In Sardinia, we have more than 1 million hectares of forest, and much of this is managed by the Foresters Agency, which, of course, is affected, like all regional agencies, by a lack of human resources and also older staff. The staff is aging, the staff is sufficient, but with dedication, they are ensuring
piena attuazione della legge regionale 8 del 2016 che
safety, and also agency was implemented, was set up in 2016 and aims to become a development model on agroforestry. Also wood production.
Come istituzioni pubbliche e regionali intendiamo anche perseguire, perché questo significa creare anche all'interno della nostra isola un circuito economico.
We want to create within our island a supply chain from wood harvesting to wood products production. developing supply chains and businesses in our region is not easy, because we have the handicap of being an island, so it's harder for our regional businesses to cross the sea and to reach the European market. So the effort of the public agencies and our region is to support local businesses. So territorial planning, safety strategies, and ensure responsible management of our forests. This is what we want to do. But this requires cooperation and support by all public agencies, and this also requires the collaboration of private businesses and the willingness to invest. In these days, the regional agencies such as Forestas, also the Department for the Environment, have prepared projects which we have submitted to the national government for the national plan for recovery and resilience, because we are trying to identify projects to be implemented in the post-COVID recovery period. So, increasing the forest cover in Sardinia, manage it properly, and also cooperate with private businesses and private individuals. Too often, private individuals that have forest land do not manage it properly, do not manage it in a conscious and informed manner, and this can be very harmful for these forests, because well-managed forests can be more resilient even in the case of forest fires. So well-maintained forests are more able to withstand fires, and so the region, its agencies, and also the universities must raise awareness among private players, education on forest management. This activity will enable us to preserve and to exploit this heritage. This means that human activities must play an important role. In the past, the presence of human activities was seen, was rejected. It was felt that no human activities should be carried out in forest areas. That was a mistake, as we know. We have inherited significant problems in Sardinia. There are a lot of polluted areas in Sardinia that needed to be cleaned up. For instance, large areas, former mining areas that are heavily polluted, and the authorities should play an important role. I know that both Forestas and another regional agency, EJ, are working on remediation plans for these former mining areas, for proper remediation and also productive use of these lands. In Sardinia, we should have proper strategies for reclaiming and cleaning up these mining areas, which now are a sorry sight. So, is renewed intention of the institutions and the region that I represent. I'm sure that the meetings that we can carry out in preparation for the next conference, we could have meetings at the local level with the municipalities, the mayors, who are the front line of the institutions in the territories and who have a first-hand knowledge of their local communities, of their ambitions and growth prospects. I am sure that on these things, mayors of the towns and villages can support our action and our objectives. Policy planning nowadays, these days, is limited by the lack of financial resources, mitigate the damage wrought by the pandemic. We can identify what ways Sardinia can contribute to the recovery of the national economy. To stop the population of the rural areas and also the brain drain that Sardinia is suffering. In past years, about 7,000 to 8,000 people per year have left the island. We're talking about a severe brain drain. So we also need academic and research tools to analyze the prospects and the strategies that we can implement. And we are totally open to collaboration. We believe in teamwork on these issues, and I'm proud to participate in this team and in the panel of speakers today, and I trust that together we can build a better future for Sardinia. I give over to the moderator again. Thank you, Assessor, Councilman. An official presentation, but also a passionate speech and a broad vision. And perhaps we have here the makings of a future president. No, I'm happy enough to be a councilman, a department head, but certainly your vision highlights a number of related issues. So thank you for your broad contribution. We can perhaps now have Mr. Durante from the Ministry of Agriculture. That and helps give his contribution. Welcome. Thank you for your invitation. Brief greetings on behalf of the Minister, Ms. Bellanova, who unfortunately is busy in the Council of Ministers on the budget law, an important session, and she could not miss it. So she asked me to bring you her greetings and her conviction that this meeting is very important. We as Ministry will take it into account. Italy is a country loved by the world for the beauty of its landscape, the quality of its agri-food products and its cultural and art heritage. In Italy, modern agriculture and traditional forms of use of the land live side by side, and we still have traditional landscapes, many of which are agroforestry landscapes of exceptional value. For instance, we have examples in Sardinia. Ministry, headed by Ms. Telanova, is MIPAF. It's an acronym because it manages both agriculture and also forestry policies. The two policies are usually considered separately, but agroforestry joins these two sectors and opens up interesting synergy opportunities. So, for centuries in the past, farmers till the soil, but also manage trees, so created beautiful landscapes and maintained biodiversity. Up to the Second World War, the agricultural areas of the land of Italy also produced wood through through strips of wooded land between the agricultural parcels. In Italy, research has shown that agroforestry systems meet the requirements of ecological intensification. That is, they allow to have greater yields with lower environmental impacts and climate impacts. The ministry, in the new programming cycle, will play higher CAP coordination role, drawing up a development plan in harmony with the needs of the different Italian regions in light of the themes you're addressing. The Minister, in line with the great European strategies that focus on the role of agroforestry, the Ministry intends to incentivize the conservation of traditional agroforestry systems and promote the creation of new agroforestry systems across the country, and in cooperation with the World of Research University, with CREA and the Institute under the oversight and cooperation of the Ministry of Agriculture and the forestry policies and the National Rural Network. The idea is to develop a specific action targeting agroforestry. We will certainly take into account the results of this important seminar meeting that will give us feed for thought and useful inputs for decision making. So I kindly ask you to send us the proceedings of your meeting so that we can take your reports and suggestions into consideration in drawing up our plans. So again, on behalf of Ms. Bellanova, thank you for your invitation, and apologies from her for not having been able to take part in person, and the best wishes for the success of your meeting. Thank you, Mr. Durante.
La presenza e anche rinnovare l'invito di una sua presenza alla conferenza europea di maggio 2021. Ringraziamo anche
I'd like to thank the ministry because since last year he was present through CREA and at various workshops, and he'll be present also in the next days' sessions with high managers. senior managers. So I am going to give the floor to the regional minister again for the declaration of the opening of the forestry year Sardinia. And with this declaration, the session will be over, and I'd like to invite you to the next 4 sessions, which will be held tomorrow morning and on the 18th. So I'd like to see Gianni Lampis, the regional minister, and I'd like to give you the floor to declare the opening of the forestry year. I, Gianni Lampis, Regional Ministry for the Protection of the Environment of the Autonomous Region of Sardinia, officially declare the forestry year of Sardinia open. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. And see you tomorrow and the next days. Thanks also to the collaborators. Goodbye.